Hello everybody, Adam B. Levine here. I want to welcome you to this special episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Recorded at the very end of the conference, Stephanie Murphy and I were joined for this late night roundup by Andreas Peterson of BitcoinUpdate.com. In this episode, we discuss our favorite things, our thoughts, our views, and our hopes. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
You gotta have the hat when you wrap up the party.
Well, I'm trying to portray this anachronistic vibe where I've got the suspenders going on.
I noticed that. I like that one.
I always wear suspenders, but it's again because I have this idea that journalism is this dead art from a past age, and if you can replicate the vibe, you can bring it back.
You do, and you've got your badge on your shirt, just like an old school.
Yeah.
You look like you stepped out of the 1920s.
Your funnometer, it's rising.
There we go.
Right.
Here we go again. One last time.
You can be honest about it.
Is
okay
Andreas,
if you are like tired.
Is Andreas Antonopoulos coming?
No, he's not.
He's... Well, we have an Andreas.
Yeah. I will just step in. That's fine.
It's Adam and Stephanie and Andreas, not the Andreas that you're used to.
We're joined by Andreas Peterson from the Bitcoin Report.
Yes, actually, it's the Bitcoin Update.
The Bitcoin Update, I apologize.
The BitcoinUpdate.com, yes.
The BitcoinUpdate.com, which is the world's only and best German-language Bitcoin-specific podcast. And you guys are weekly, right?
Exactly, yes, yeah. We do record weekly as far as it's possible. So far, we've made it weekly. And we started out as a very small podcast in a segment, in an open source podcast, where there's a lot of beer being consumed. People like we just met on the street and talked about open source, and the topic always circled around, you can guess,
to Bitcoin.
The Bitcoin, yeah. So it was like kind of taking a huge share in this podcast, so we decided to make a segment dedicated to that and spin it off, and I think that's been a good success so far.
Well, I don't speak German, but I hear good things. So, if you guys start doing transcripts, I'll be able to give you more feedback on your content, but as it stands right now, so I guess we should probably intro ourselves at this point. It's about, 10 o'clock at night? On Sunday, the last day of the Bitcoin Festival, the Bitcoin Conference 2013, and we are all dead exhausted.
So we are like feeling right before the hangover. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like before
the hangover.
This is the hangover. No, you have to sleep to have a hangover.
Yeah. So this was a hell of a thing, wasn't it? I know that I had pretty high expectations going into it because I was, thinking that this is something that's coming, the time is right. There's a lot of people coming in from all over the world, but it really blew me away, I got to say. Andreas, so you were here both as I want to say vendor, but that's the wrong word. Yeah. You were here displaying from Mycelium, which was really one of the most interesting projects.
He was one of the booth babes. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we had a nice booth babes, and we were the main sponsors actually of this conference. And we tried to present our platform to the general audience and just get some feedback on it. So our main product will be the Bitcoin card. So at bitcoincard.org you can see an inspirational video that's like sort of a vision of what is going to come. Of course, the first iteration we are going to show is going to be a little bit, let's say, down to earth.
What are the other products? I was only aware of the Bitcoin card.
Yeah, so the Bitcoin card is the main product. And to support it, we will create a whole bunch of additional, let's say, products that you can use with it. So the Mycelium wallet will be on the Play Store, hopefully very soon, actually. And we will have solutions for merchants to use Bitcoin in a very easy way. So you can sell your products for Bitcoin very easily, and you don't have a currency risk, and you'd have zero confirmations, and we guarantee that you will get the money. But that's a little bit in the future, far out in the future, so you can't get that right now. The wallet will be probably the first thing that will be available for Mycelium.
So we're going to actually have Alex, the visionary behind that product, on as soon as he gets back to Moscow. I spent my entire yesterday basically booking our next 4 weeks worth of guests. And
wow, high five.
Yeah, seriously.
You.
Well, Stephanie, God, you recorded like 15 interviews.
Oh no, it's more like 30 at this point.
Oh my God.
We're going to have content for months if we want it.
Seriously.
We might have to release a whole podcast that's just interviews or something like that.
Yeah. Well, again, the bonus content thing I think just has to happen because there's so much content coming out of this. We haven't really talked about specifics besides the Mycelium card, but, the people who were presenting ideas here, one of the guys who gave a presentation that I really, really liked, his name is John Light. We're again going to have him on the show. His concept is he's really focused on cloud identity management, and with the idea that Facebook and these other platforms are essentially data silos that take your data and then turn the customer into the product.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that that's kind of obvious to, if you look at the system and say, okay, well, how are they making money? Well, obviously that's how it is. So his idea with this talk on personal clouds is to functionally take that concept of here's your identity, here's all of this data about you that lives in the cloud, it's all encrypted, and you have complete control over who gets to see what, and you essentially open channels to various people. And it's almost like when you friend somebody in the system, you're signing a contract with them saying, I'd like to share this information with you. Yeah. And you can set really rich parameters on it too. So like maybe some people you only want to be able to see particular information during, like from 9 to 5, in the day. Yeah. And it gives you really complete granular control to be able to do that.
Isn't that exactly the idea behind Diaspora? Or was it?
Yes, I think
Google
that
Plus
was
has some of those features too, but not really.
Right, but Google Plus, so the other thing that's really interesting to me about this is Google Plus has this concept, right? Except Google does own all your data, so there's that part. But the other part is that you have to be yourself, right? So like you're Stephanie Murphy, no matter what it is, no matter which circle you're talking to, it's just that different circles see different aspects of you. Whereas with this, you can actually maintain multiple identities and use application-specific identities in certain scenarios where they're advantageous. So you can have one that's like, a real name associated with it that is your real name, and it has your medical records in it. So you go to the doctor, and instead of them having your medical records for the rest of your life, instead, you can say, okay, well, here are my medical records, and you can have them for 6 days, and then after that, they're no longer really relevant to you.
So if you're using this as a tool, I'm guessing that's kind of missing the point, because if you're using one tool to manage all these identities, they are still linked physically because they are on one machine together.
Well, no, actually, I mean, we're going to have John on the show pretty quick. He's actually local to me. He's only about 40 miles away from where I record. I'm sure he can go into it in more detail than I can, but no, it's really... And now I've forgotten what you actually asked me.
Yeah, so if you're using all these identities from one particular program, they are actually physically linked to your computer at the same time. So they're not like encrypted in separate...
They are encrypted. Everything is encrypted. And what happens is that essentially you've got all of your data stored encrypted on your machine, and there's a backup that lives in the cloud, and that backup synchronizes with everything else. So it's like when you work with Google, like I do a lot of things with Google Drive, and when I work with that, it stays in the cloud. It starts in the cloud, I build it in the cloud, it stays in the cloud, and then I can access it. So I don't actually have a local copy most of the time. Whereas with this, you do have a local copy. So anyways, that was kind of one of the interesting things that came out of this. Andreas, what was your favorite thing at the conference?
I think what I was most impressed with was the amount of new innovation going on. So right before the conference, I was really pumped and said, wow, I'm so excited. This is going to be like, I'm looking forward to this and this and this project. So especially I liked most actually the Llama PTC, the Bitcoin ATM. I think they have a real practical solution to all these kind of problems. But of course,
I know those guys. They live near me in New Hampshire.
Yeah. I think they have a really convincing story and to bring this to the market. And of course, on the technical side, for me, practically, this was like the only talk I attended. It was about HD wallets, hierarchical deterministic wallets. This is going to make Bitcoin really more usable once this is implemented in the wallet software. So I'm looking forward to that.
What does that mean?
So HD wallets basically means that you don't have to back up your wallet every time you send a transaction, right? Because right now, if you're using Bitcoin QT, the way it works, you have a key pool, and that key pool gets depleted if you do a lot of transactions. So then your backup gets invalid because your new keys are no longer in this backup anymore. Yeah. So
what you're basically saying is that if I use 50, like let's say the buffer is 50.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so the buffer is 50.
The buffer is 100 by default.
Buffer is 100. Okay, so if the buffer is 100, if you're saying that between the time when I back up my wallet, if I then generate 100 more addresses, then after that point, those are no longer actually recoverable unless you refresh the backup.
Yeah, and you have to be aware that you are also generating addresses when sending money and when receiving money, because you have to generate the change addresses.
So it's transactions almost.
Yeah, it's transactions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So then there's only a buffer of 100 transactions between backups.
Yeah, and back and forth actually, because you're generating new addresses when you're receiving something, if you're actively doing that, but you are automatically generating new addresses when you are receiving change.
Well, I think I need to refresh my backup.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bitcoin QT really needs regular backups, actually. Yeah, all the time. So HD wallets, once that's implemented, you can back up just one seed, and the way it works is it generates new public keys and new private keys, and it can actually do fancy tricks like creating a new seed from the master seed that is, let's say, for one department of a company, and each department can use its own private seed, and the CEO of the company can use the master seed to spend all departments' funds at once, something like that.
Yeah.
So you can imagine.
What does the HD stand for?
Yeah, hierarchical deterministic. So deterministic wallet means you have a seed and all the keys are generated from that. And hierarchical means that you can create a tree structure, then generates a bunch of private keys and associated public keys. So the most common use case would be like, I'm a shop, I want to accept Bitcoin, and then I put my master public key into a public software that's running somewhere on the net that doesn't need to be very secure because nobody can access your funds, but you can generate a new address for each customer, for example, without any trouble on this remote machine, which is not very secure, and then you're receiving the money and spending them, let's say, from your paper backup or whatever you need. And Peter Wheeler, the core developer, is working on that, and a lot of programs, hardware vendors also, and hopefully also the Bitcoin card will pick that up and use it. That's not a promise, but I hope,
right.
Yeah.
We're like I said, we're talking very late at night, so take everything at face value here.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, you're here with just a ton of different projects, and you've been generating incredible content. So you said that you did 30 interviews.
Yeah.
Who do you think was your favorite interview?
Oh.
I know it's like asking you to pick your children with the people here. Okay, let's do a top 3.
Yeah, okay. Well, Gavin. I talked to Gavin. That was really cool. I sort of had an in because I knew him because he was okay, so I'm involved with this radio show called Free Talk Live. We actually broadcasted tonight here from the conference. And Ian and Mark, the main hosts of Free Talk Live, had met Gavin back in 2010 or something like that to have lunch with him and talk about Bitcoins. And I think he pretty much convinced them to get on board. So I kind of knew him that way. And he also lives in the town where I went to college. So we kind of talked about that stuff a little bit. But we also talked about a lot of other stuff. And he said he's mostly a libertarian, and that was cool. I always like it when I get people to admit that they're libertarians, because I am. and
I think on the Bitcoin conference you kind of have to say that. Because I got in some heavy discussions, actually. Because I would not say I'm this label or that label, but I'm certainly not a straight-out libertarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We actually talked about this on Free Talk Live
Right.
when I was on for my brief period of time.
I'm not referring to the Libertarian Party or political party or anything like that. Just somebody who values human freedom, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, the labels do get confusing.
Yeah. I think labels are dangerous.
Yeah, okay.
Labels put you into corners and
but what
limit you in your imagination.
But what do you call yourself to succinctly describe your views?
Yeah, that's a
I go with socially conservative and I go with fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
Complete opposite.
Yeah. That's very late.
I go with Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky. Okay, sure, I'll buy that. So that was number 1 for you. Do you have any others?
Yeah. Okay. Let me think. Who else I interviewed? Oh my God.
Putting you on the spot here.
Some of my interviews were kind of short. I would have liked to have more time to talk to the people, but that's fine. I guess I got some sort of names. I talked to Mike Hearn today. That was interesting. He said some even more interesting stuff off the record, I guess, which you can hear the interview, but I won't repeat what he said. But we had a conversation about different uses of Bitcoins for smart property, and also some of the social engineering that's built into Bitcoins and some of the other altcoins. That was interesting to me. That was definitely in my top 3. And who was the other one? Let's see. I think I have to think about this a little bit more.
That's
fine.
I'll
pass on it for now.
We had a great interview on. See what I did. Stephanie worked through the whole thing. My job as the editor-in-chief is to generate content, but also I'm working out the schedule and I'm looking for contributors. So one of the really great things about being here and for this time is that there are so many just crazy smart people. I mean, the group that came here has totally self-selected to be here, and it's just the amount of passion that's in this crowd is absolutely unreal. It's humbling because it's the sort of thing where I have thrown myself into this in a very wholehearted way, and I've kind of viewed myself as this crazy outlier. And turns out not that crazy, or maybe that crazy, but at least there are other crazy people who are going on this same journey with us as we go down the rabbit hole.
I bet a lot of people were thinking that same thing. Like, I think that's the point of conferences to some extent. You're out there wherever you live in the world, and you feel kind of alone because there aren't like tons of people around you. Yeah, maybe you can go to meetups and stuff, but there aren't like a ton of people around you who really share your interests on a deep level. And when you go to a conference, it's like a little city gets created, almost like Burning Man, I guess you could say, for a weekend or however long, and you're suddenly among a bunch of people who are like real visionaries and luminaries and who totally share your interests.
One of the really
One
of the really cool things was to see all these people who are functionally, like cypherpunks, which is like this concept of people who use cryptography as a way to do stuff. Jack, give me a better definition than that.
I would say a cypherpunk is someone who believes that he can change the society by using cryptography, and
that's a better definition.
Yeah. So essentially, the use of cryptography is very central to that.
So some of the people here who kind of most fall into that category are total celebrities here, and it's this cool thing. You see the talks that are really sparsely populated. They're the ones that are talking about, like the regulatory. The regulatory actually was very, very crowded. There's a lot of people who are really concerned about that, but some of the talks that are about more mainstream topics, I can't think of any off the top of my head, were not that well attended. But then on the flip side of it, you've got people who there's a guy who created e-money who was here and speaking. And when it was actually while I was outside during part of your panel, Stephanie, there was a group of probably 50 or 60 people who had just surrounded him, mobbed him, and it lasted for like a half hour.
Wow.
Where it was just, and there were people with cameras holding him up. It was like it was a celebrity, and it's like, wow, this is such a contrary thing. I mean, this is, we're in this real world place, but it's so not the real world. We've taken it over, and it's just people like us.
Yeah, referring to that self-selection you previously mentioned, I think it's a very hard path to actually follow. You have to know a lot about a number of topics to be really enthusiastic about Bitcoin, and most people give up on half of the way and say, well, that's crazy internet thingy that the young people are older. Actually, it's not so much the young people, it's well-educated people also.
Well, it depends on what your definition of young is. We were talking about this all throughout the conference, that the age group that is here that is most impactful is actually probably the age group between about 25, 26 and 35 to maybe 40 on the upper end. And then beyond that, you certainly have outliers. I'm not saying that everybody was between those, but the people who are doing all of the craziest stuff are kind of in that range.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the younger people don't actually fly.
Don't understand it.
All of it. Coming to the conference is a big hurdle for many. I mean,
some.
Just getting in a plane.
That's true.
And you have to be
That's a good point.
In your working life, and yeah.
And do you think there were anybody who didn't come because they don't want to be public, essentially? Almost like Satoshi?
I think that maybe Satoshi was here. Who would know? Again,
Right.
That's what I would do is, if you're going to make something disruptive like this, the play is you make it, you get it to the point where, your idea has legs and it's going to work. And then you walk away, throw away that identity. Again, coming back to the personal cloud concept, it's about having application-specific identities, because the reality is these technologies are dangerous. And it's not dangerous because you're going to cut off your finger. It's dangerous because they're disruptive and because they change the way that the world works. And once you kind of extrapolate that out, there are real implications that come along, because people who have power really don't like giving it up. And anytime you have disruption, you have shifts of how the power is distributed.
Yeah. I have a bit of suspicion that the real innovative new uses for Bitcoin are not essentially the ones we are seeing on the surface right now, but rather real disruptive Tor-based services, for example.
Sure.
I'm not referring to any particular one, but because there are really new ones coming up, I think that will be an interesting space to watch. Also, virtual games, games that are integrating virtual currencies. That could be very interesting. I don't think those people will show up here. So they will build something, put it out there, maybe care for it, maybe not.
Yeah. So while I was here, we saw at least 3 documentaries being shot by different groups.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has seen it, but there's a documentary about competitive Scrabble players called Word Wars that came out a couple of years ago. Has anybody seen this? No?
I am not nerdy enough for that, but it sounds awesome.
We went through a period of time, my wife and I, who is our
She's
acting
nodding.
engineer, where we were watching a lot of documentaries because watching, anything else was a little bit stupid, it seemed at the time. Again, it's one of those things where the subject almost doesn't matter. What matters is that the people have the passion and they have the appreciation of it, and if you get enough of those people together, then you can do really insane things. And again, tying it back to Bitcoin, so I bring this up because the guy who made that documentary is now making a documentary talking about essentially the Bank of International Settlement and all of the various ways that it is influencing. I think that he said the title is called Who Wants to Be a Trillionaire or something like that. And it's about Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin is the continuity that ties it all together, ties together how these decisions are made on a global scale and how, so anyways, that was one of them. There were a couple others, this one called something about the revolution. I don't know. Those guys were around a lot. RT was here extensively doing interviews.
Yeah, they got Andreas Antonopoulos on camera.
And me, I believe.
And he
it's
said he didn't
my first...
pimp the podcast.
Oh, he didn't pimp the podcast. Well, that's okay. They got me on, and all I did was pimp the
awesome.
podcast.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
So,
there's a lot of TV.
Yeah, and
there's a
the
lot
rise,
of TV.
rise and rise of Bitcoin, that will be interesting too.
Yeah.
They got around. So there are German guys doing a great Bitcoin documentary as well. They are going across Europe. I think they couldn't attend the conference because of their lacking donations, so maybe if you hear this, you should get to thatbitcoindocumentary.org. They are great guys. You should support them.
Yes. What was the URL again?
I think it was thatbitcoindocumentary.org.
Thebitcoindocumentary.org.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll have to check that out. Did you guys watch the keynote?
No.
No.
I was at the booth that I was working at with these nonprofit organizations, and it was packed during the whole keynote. I couldn't get away.
So I watched the keynote, and it was painful. And I understand why it took me a while to get it. I understand why the foundation chose to feature the Winklevoss twins as the keynote speakers, even though they didn't deliver a very good speech by any real standard, but it's because they bring to the mainstream press almost a sense of legitimacy, because for some reason having a lot of money, regardless of how you got that money, is a source of being right in our particular culture. I don't agree with that, and I think that, from the perspective of actually it being a keynote speech, it was a very poor choice. But from an optics perspective, looking at it through the lens of the mainstream media, if once you start reading the coverage, I read a story on CNET and somewhere else too, and they quoted maybe 2 sentences from the talk, but it was all about the fact that these people were investing money into it. Now, that being said, the way they're investing money into it is one of the very few ways that I legitimately consider hoarding, because their whole strategy was to buy bitcoins, stick them onto flash drives, and put them into distributed bank safe deposits basically around the country, which is great and all, but it makes it impossible for you to ever spend it, so there's not even really the chance of that happening. And I think that that's a little bit dumb,
Well, on the other hand, it drives the price of bitcoins up.
Well, I consider that legitimate because right now, yeah, sure, you can buy your pizza online maybe. That's fine, but you're not buying a great deal of property. They can certainly try to invest in Bitcoin businesses, and that's, I think, is...
Well, they've done that.
They will certainly do that.
Right, but they have a real advantage. It's one of those things where because Bitcoin is money, if Bitcoin succeeds, anybody who holds a lot of Bitcoin succeeds. So, from that perspective, I think it's valuable to them, but I'm saying that as a service to as being actual part of the community, I feel like it almost isolates you when you say, okay, well, I've made my investment and it's going away, locked in a lockbox, and we'll look at it in 4 years. That means that those are out of circulation. You're right, it drives the price higher. But it doesn't help anybody who's trying to build the market.
Well, but it kind of does, because it gives publicity to Bitcoin.
Sure.
And I don't think, looking at it from the perspective of, does it help the community is where they're coming from at all.
Yeah, clearly.
But that's fine, because it's their money. You could argue about how they got that money. They probably didn't really, work for it. Or
they sued somebody for it. So, that's valuable, in our society.
I think people really gripe about that. But, ultimately, if it's somebody's Bitcoins, whatever they want to do with them, I'm not here to tell them what to do.
Well, they had to buy the Bitcoins from somebody. So, I guess, whatever their investment meant actually went back into somebody's pockets who was holding Bitcoins before.
Yeah, and somebody had to agree to sell them, right? So, that they named their price and they got it, right? So that was a voluntary transaction. So, I'm not about to get in the middle of that, but
Fair enough.
yeah, I mean, one thing I heard about their speech was that they said it's time to come to the feds and try to get them to regulate
Well, that was a big theme
Bitcoin.
here. I mean, there were a lot of people kind of representing it's not really libertarian. It's almost like anarcho-capitalist viewpoint of regulation, which is get the hell out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
just
me.
Get the hell out.
I agree.
And then there's the other camp that's like, this is going to happen one way or another without, with or without us. So it's better if we're in the conversation than not. But I mean, Stephanie, I'm curious what you think. To a certain extent, isn't by participating in the system legitimizing the saying that yes, regulators, you have authority over this? I mean, is that a positive thing or is that a negative thing, or do you think that it's
negative. The only thing they could possibly do to help Bitcoin is to get out of it. And I can kind of understand, I guess, or relate to these companies who they've invested a lot into Bitcoin startup businesses or whatever, and they're uncertain and they're afraid because what they're afraid of is that there's going to be some kind of new regulation that comes down that's really going to hurt their business that they're going to have no say over. And that sucks when you've invested a lot of time into a startup. So I get why they want it to happen and they want to have a say in it. And they want some clarity about what's going to be required of them because they see it as inevitable. But again, I think they're kind of missing the point that the best thing that the feds could do is step out of the way. And how are they actually going to even regulate Bitcoin functionally? I mean, it's one of those things that just lends itself to decentralization. And so
I think the centralized exchanges, they are definitely a good playground for the regulators, and you should stick them to their playground and leave the rest of us alone.
Right.
who are doing useful work.
Well, isn't it almost a lose-lose situation though for those companies? Because I understand what you're saying. If regulation, I understand what you're saying, but then on the flip side of it, if let's say that the regulations do get solidified and they're good, and they look like it's going to be permissible, then doesn't that mean that the legacy banking system just comes in and says, okay, well, if it's legal, then sure, we're gonna provide this service, and frankly, obsolete BitInstant, because BitInstant or BitPay or really any of these things, they're really all workaround companies built on the idea that that the legacy system won't interface with us, so therefore we're going to create this system where you jump through all these hoops.
Well, it would enrich the entrenched interests and the big businesses, and it would impoverish, the Bitcoin startups and the small guys. And I mean, again, I think these Bitcoin startups who are asking for regulation are kind of missing the point that they came about and they sprung up in an environment that was totally free. And the less free it gets, the more difficult it's going to be for new Bitcoin startups to come out and for, frankly, technology to push forward and new technologies to come out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think it's a very valuable thing to have Bitcoin as a standalone currency that's not even recognized as a currency. So it's just, we are sending these funny internet tokens. And on top of that, you can do all kinds of innovative new services. Yeah. And I think that's that's really going to provide a value for humanity.
Yeah.
It's funny to say it like that, but yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about other themes at the conference?
Yeah.
Anything like that?
Did you identify any?
Yeah. I guess one thing that came up to me was it's been a while since, at least in the U.S., it's been a while since there's been a period of real economic prosperity. And I definitely got this sense of almost reminiscent of sort of the .com era. And in fact, Bitcoin has been compared this weekend to the internet in 1992. We're at the bleeding edge of technology, we're the first adopters, and we're going to all make bank out of this or become really successful or be really famous or whatever. And people were partying already, because of that, and, basically expecting this to happen. So, I mean, when I see that, I share in that jubilation totally, and I think this is huge. It's a huge deal, obviously. I'm also a little bit cautious because I know not all of these Bitcoin startups are going to succeed. Some startups do fail. And
some startups do fail.
Most startups do fail. 90%.
Most startups do fail.
50% chance of exchanges.
50%.
Exchanges failing.
Now that's a fake number. Now they cited that number again, but it was 43% of exchanges fail and take money with them, but there's a 23% margin of error.
Yeah.
So
so it could be anywhere from 20 to 60%.
Exactly. So 20 to 60%.
I have some practical experience with that, so a lot of my money got blown away.
Oh, that's too bad. Where were you in?
Oh well, kind of all of them.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So my I think it's my job is to know the Bitcoin space, I just try out all the things. Yeah, so I got shut down by all the things, of course.
God.
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
Just
sorry to
not
hear
by
that.
all of my money, of course. Yeah, but the most recent one was Bitcoin24.com.
Oh, I
that
heard.
that
Yeah,
was
I saw that.
run by a German guy. But I think there is a decent chance that someday I might get some of my fiat money that was tied up back.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. And
There's a lot of risk in this space, and I mean, it's when you see the big successes and when you see the big booms, it's hard to. It's easy to forget about the risk that's there and to kind of keep a perspective. It's easy to get like super excited and say like, oh yeah, we're guaranteed to succeed, but that's not the reality. A lot can happen, and that's okay because, you know, ultimately we're in a process of growth. We're in a process of figuring out like what the market actually wants, you know, in terms of Bitcoin and what kinds of new technologies can be brought to the fore. And, you know, that's okay. That's all the process of growth. There's a little bit of creative destruction in there. You know, and it's unfortunate when that happens not creatively because of regulators, you know, and that's what we've seen a lot of the time. But there's also, you know, there's hackers, there's thefts. People have to learn things about security with Bitcoins the hard way, and that does happen too.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate thing. So I don't know. I guess, you know, like it's great to have parties where there are free drinks. Like I love that to happen. It's great to see people walking around in suits, you know, young, attractive guys, you know, and there's a lot of guys here. But we do have to keep things in perspective a little bit too, because we don't want to be in a bubble and not know it, you know, and nobody has any clue. You know what I mean?
I think it's way not in a bubble because it's I think the potential is huge. We're going to see a lot more.
Are we talking about a price bubble or are we talking about a reality bubble?
No, I'm kind of talking about both. I mean, because the price reflects the reality and the attitude about Bitcoin to a certain extent.
Not here, it doesn't. I didn't hear one person talking about the price this entire conference.
Wow, that's
you?
Interesting. No, not really, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
except kind of at the Lamasu machine.
Oh, right, where they're doing exchanges. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, but outside of that, I mean, it wasn't like, you know, people are going around and going, oh man, can you believe it's up to 125? This is so fantastic. We're all going to be rich. I mean, no, nobody really cares about that. We're all talking about the different, like the companies that are being built around it to make it better and to make it easier and to make it cleaner.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess what I was referring to when I said bubble was just the amount of venture capital money that's flowing into Bitcoin startups right now.
Oh, God, yes.
That is what I see as potentially, you know, some of that is not going to succeed, you know.
Yeah.
Some of those companies are going to go bust for whatever reason.
But
right?
again, but on that, to that point, the whole venture model when it comes to this is to, you know...
Yeah, it builds in risk.
Well, yeah, but it builds in a huge amount of failure. You know, the standard model for this type of company is like you make 16 investments, 15 of them are supposed to fail, and the one that succeeds is the one that makes you crazy rich beyond your wildest dreams.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, on the venture side, we certainly did see some of that, and there were a lot of people kind of wandering around, looking in places, trying to figure out what's going on. I think it's the attitude that's most important. We had a venture guy come to one of our to our first meetup on Friday, and it was really interesting talking to him because, you know, he had just left his company, and again, I'm not going to get into names, but he had you know, a couple $100,000 that he was wanting to throw at projects. And when I talked to him on his way out a couple hours ago, he's like, you know, the thing I realized is that a few $100,000 is just not enough to, you know, be able to do projects and spread the risk around. And so what he was going to do is he was flying back immediately to his old venture firm and was going to, you know, say, hey, you know, let's throw a couple $1 million at this project. And again, even from the venture space, a couple $1 million is nothing. I mean, that's like a couple people chipping in on that side, whereas, you know, you have these giant funds.
Yeah, but Stephanie, you were comparing that to the dot-com bubble. I think the dot-com bubble only really took off once everything was traded on the exchanges, so on the New York Stock Exchange, and I think we are way far apart from that happening in the Bitcoin space. So there is no like mass APOs where everyone's grandma is throwing money at the stocks, at the Bitcoin stocks.
And the other thing, of course, that's different from the .com era is that the monetization with Bitcoin is built in. So, I mean, so again, you have this problem where with the .com, everybody was so excited about getting the eyeballs that, you know, that that was the focus. And so it's like, well, it's like Facebook. It's like we just need to get the users, and then we'll worry about how to monetize it later. But the problem is that when you build your business around not monetizing with the idea that you'll do it later, what you wind up doing is as you try to monetize, every single thing you do pushes users away from you because the service is getting worse instead of getting better. So with Bitcoin, again, that's just like, it has other problems. I think that the regulatory risk is meaningful, but it doesn't have that problem. The monetization is actually there from like minute one because it's money.
Absolutely.
But there are people who speculate on Bitcoin. I mean, because it's also a commodity.
Yeah. Okay, but that's my point is that, that's different. Mm-hmm. You can speculate on it. You couldn't speculate on the internet companies until they were on the stock exchange, but because Bitcoin is money and it's floating value, relatively speaking.
And it's an ETF on the whole Bitcoin space.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That of course is the other thing, is that if you're looking at this from a risk perspective solely, buying Bitcoin is such a safer investment, because if you're investing in companies and Bitcoin fails, all the Bitcoin companies fail, right? But if you're investing in Bitcoin, it doesn't matter if the Bitcoin companies fail. It just matters if there's adoption overall, and you still have that exponential multiplier effect that kicks in. And so, again, it's just one of those things where because of what and how it operates, because of what it is and how it operates, it kind of breaks a lot of the rules because the monetization is already built in. You don't need to worry about that part of the model. You need to worry about other things, but not that.
So now we're talking about the price all the time, right?
No, we're not.
I haven't checked the price in a couple of days. I'm going to go to my Bitcoin Paranoid app. I did notice that after the... what was it called? After the GigaOhm meetup on Thursday night, which was a smashing success, there was a bump in price. There was a bump in price of about $5 of Bitcoins. Now, I don't know if that's meaningful, but I thought maybe it was.
Yeah. Something else that definitely is true here is this is an incredibly multicultural event. This was really, there were people flying in from all over the world.
I love the accents.
The accents were great. We had
including
such
yours,
fun.
Andreas.
Yeah.
I can't get rid of that.
We had such fun talking with, I wanted to say a set of Greeks. They were actually a couple of really nice Greek guys who hadn't known each other. And we saw this, actually, is that I saw this whole group of Canadians, right, who didn't know each other before the thing, but because they were Canadians, wound up hanging out together for most of the thing, and just going around from thing to thing. Actually, Peter Dushinsky, one of the contributors for the show, kind of glommed onto this group. I didn't
get to meet him. He must have been
you didn't
with
get
the
to meet
Canadians
him
the whole time.
Oh yeah, Peter's a great guy, man.
Yeah,
but
I would like to.
It was the same thing with there were a couple of Greek guys wandering around, who had met over the course of the thing, and all had projects that were sort of relevant to each other. And so then you hook up here. And so even though it's this thing happening in America, they're all going back to Greece through their various channels in some point in the near future, and they all are collaborating now to build tools and seminars and trainings to essentially get this stuff into the wild. It's very exciting. The other thing that jumped out to me was that it was so much less about the talks and so much more about the attendees. Nearly every single person that I talked to, and really towards the end of it, I realized that I was missing out by not introducing myself to every single person that I saw. And because everybody has a project, even the people who were here as attendees were functionally not attendees. They should have been speakers.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so people came to our booth. Almost everyone could make a speech of their own about what they are doing in the Bitcoin space. And I think there are like only one or two people who just said, well, I'm interested in the whole thing, but 100 people.
I think that's it. It attracts curious, active-minded people, and they all then, as a result, once they understand it enough, want to have their own projects, and they do. And because nothing's stopping them, because it's so easy to just start one of your own.
And there's so much to do. I mean, there's so much to do. Is you can look at this from so many different angles, and everybody looks at it and sees something a little bit different. Because coming from our own context, you're able to just apply it to whatever the heck you're already doing and see the ways that it makes it easier or better or more efficient, or just, it just changes things, and it's really powerful.
Another thing, this is going to be kind of meta because we're doing like a podcast about the podcast, but like just to toot our own horn a little bit.
Oh my God.
I was stunned at the number of people. We've only been podcasting for a month, Adam.
Just a month.
And like I was stunned at the number of people who A, had heard of our show, B, had listened to our show, C, recognized me without me knowing who they were. Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, I did, and
I think your podcast was way overdue. So we obviously because of my accent, I want to an English podcast all the time. So we were asked multiple times, well, switch to English, you will get such an audience, and there's no English podcast. What's going on? And yeah, you were just right for the time, I guess.
Thank you for saying that, Andreas. One of the kind of most fun experiences that I had here was being able to meet all of these people who I have been reading their stuff for years, and I had no idea what they looked like. I oftentimes didn't know their real name, but, Twitter was such a tool. Twitter was such a tool for figuring out who people were, coordinating with that and then scheduling to meet up. I get to meet one of my personal heroes, Jeffrey Paul, who goes by Sneak online. He's the guy who did a talk at CCC back in 2010, I think it was.
What's CCC?
CCC is the Chaos Communication Congress.
C4 then.
C4?
Yeah, it's C4.
Anyways, it's a German yearly seminar that's basically on information security and stuff like that, and it's kind of geeky. It's actually really technical geeky. I'm not that technical as far as being able to look at code and say, okay, well, I see what that does, but I like to hear people who know what it does talk about it, because that helps me to be able to understand. At least I don't understand exactly how it works, but it's like a dollar. You don't need to understand how a dollar works in order to know that it's useful, in order to know its purpose. So that side of it was really exciting, getting to talk to these people. And then on the other side of it, having people come up to me and say, I'm here because of you. I came to this show because of your show and the ideas that it sparked in my head, because that's like my dream. That's like my dream, is to help people have ideas about this, because I have so many ideas about this, and I know that I'm not the only one, and that's very exciting to me. So other people who we met, actually, I'm not even going to try to list them.
There's too many to list. Yeah,
and too many. I don't want to leave anybody off.
So many of them were really amazing. Like, I felt like, starting at our meetup on Friday when we had listeners come and meet us, I really connected with a lot of people there, and then following that at the conference, just met a lot of cool people that I felt like I had a lot in common with, so that was awesome.
This was an incredible experience. And I do not travel. That is not something that I enjoy doing. And I didn't have to travel anywhere near as far as most people. That's the only reason why I came. But after this experience, if this is what Bitcoin conferences are going to be like, then I'm going to get in a plane. I'm going to fly wherever the heck we need to go next time something like this happens.
Yeah. So then you should come to Vienna.
I know. I don't want to go to Germany.
The UN system.
I don't want to go to Europe.
Well, you don't have to go to Germany.
I don't want to go
in
to
Austria.
But it's okay. My wife's been working on me with this for a while, so we might find ourselves there. We might find ourselves in New York too. I'm finding that I want to go to that.
Awesome.
So we can hit that together. That'll be fun.
Yeah, so 1st to 3rd November, there will be the UN system.net. I think the focus will be more political aspects of Bitcoin and anarchism, 3D printing.
Well, the 3D printing I'm interested in, but again, it's the technology, I think, and the projects that are based around the politics. Honestly, I feel like the more we focus on that, honestly, the less useful it is, because it draws such negative attention to the whole thing.
Yeah, it is. That's true. I would like more business-oriented stuff, but who knows? It's going to be a long time until November. We'll see how that develops.
Yeah. Well, again, there are other shows that are going to be. There are other conferences that are going to be starting up before that. So I think there's at least one or two before Vienna.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no, I mean the Bitcoin conference ecosystem. This was really a proof of concept that now is the time, and the people are here, and the collaborations are here. My God, the collaborations! I gave a talk on content monetization, and it was not to a terribly large room, but I had probably 15 people follow me out, and 4 of them wanted to build the services that I was saying. We should build these services.
Oh, like what?
Well, again, because my focus has been on a couple of things. One thing that we've done with the show is we have these tip widgets. The problem is that the tip widgets are kind of broken. They don't really work for everybody, and even for the people they do work for, they could really be improved in a number of ways, like making it so we could have different addresses on each of the sites that the show is posted to, and then when donations come in, we're able to see those. We can do that now, but the problem is that our widget only displays one address at a time. So we need a way for it to take multiple addresses, sum them together, and then display the total for the show, but still be able to give us the information about where the tips are coming from.
That sounds like a great implementation for HD wallets, actually.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's just, you can do that without HD wallets as well, of course.
Well,
but you had someone offer to build that.
Oh, yeah. I know we had someone offer to build that, and I spent an hour talking with the business development guy at Flatter, which is a microtransaction
I'm familiar.
tipping service, basically.
They use FRNs, though, right?
They do use FRNs now.
Until now, yeah.
But they're looking to obsolete themselves. I mean, again, I can't get into too many details, but there's a lot of movement in this space right now. And I think that we're kind of seeing the end of these proprietary tipping services, or these proprietary, I don't want to name names, but the reality is that platforms that try to intercept the value, try to say, hey, come and have a wallet on our platform. I think those are going the way of the dinosaurs because they're just totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Well, Flatter in particular, I think that has a use in Bitcoin. So when we started out talking about Bitcoin, a lot of people said, well, build a Bitcoin Flatter replacement, because it's actually very rewarding for like podcasters to have monthly donations in a regular way, and for the users it's like they are allocating their cultural budget. So they say, okay, I want a fixed amount, and then they are spreading this amount each month, so they don't have to take care of all the divisions and microtransactions and so on. So they just have their subscriptions, and some of them expire, some of them are removed, and some of them are added. Yeah, I think that's a useful service, even with Bitcoin, because you don't want to send out like 100 different tiny donations to all the tiny things you're listening and all blogs you're reading.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it too early to start a travel fund? Like if the listeners enjoyed our coverage of this conference, they could send us to other conferences, something like that.
I think that's definitely something we should be talking about. But the good news is that in addition to having, listener support, it looks like we're going to be able to have sponsor support, because again, that was the other thing here is that, we're really, this is the start of something big, and it's the start of something big for Bitcoin, but we're riding the wave here. I mean, in the press room, one of the other outfits that was there is called BTC Journal. They don't exist yet. They start existing next week. So there's competition moving into the space, but at the same time, just because we have like a month head start, it's such an advantage. It's crazy how much of an advantage, doing the show for a month has been, because it's gotten us into so many people's heads that, I have a feeling that over the next couple of months, we're going to be able to leverage this into some really incredible, insightful interviews that are going to, blow people's minds. And it's crazy. The people who are developing these technologies and developing these platforms have such vision. And, it's really easy to get stuck in an echo chamber and say, oh, man, that's a great idea. No, that's a great idea. No, that's a great idea. But to a certain extent, they are. and so it's really, like I said at the beginning of this, when you throw yourself entirely into something and you make it all that you are, it's hard because you can feel alone. And what this showed us is that there's at least about 600 of the 1,000 attendees here who are doing exactly the same thing. And with so many people quitting their jobs and focusing all of their creative effort and all of their time onto these properties and projects, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I think we will see a world with new services, and that's great. That's evolution, or industrial revolution 4.0. Something.
It's something. So that's about all the time we have for tonight. We're going on 11 o'clock, and I certainly have to get to bed. And I know that Stephanie's probably still on New Hampshire time, so...
I'm on West Coast time even when I'm on the East Coast.
Oh.
I stay up late.
Have you adjusted yet, Andreas?
I think I will just skip a few nights, maybe. That will be fine.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, great. This was the most fun I've had in a lot of years. And I've covered a lot of conferences before. We're doing this at the San Jose Convention Center. I covered GDC, Game Developers Convention, here for a number of years. And there were exponentially less people here, and it was exponentially more interesting than I've ever seen it before. So that's about it for this episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Poor voice, Adam. It sounds like ragged.
I have been talking nonstop just for days. It's crazy, again, because you're just bouncing from hour-long conversation to hour-long conversation with each person.
I'm going to jump in out of the peanut gallery.
Okay.
I can't resist.
It's a peanut.
It's Justice here. Justice.
Ranveer, yeah.
Yes.
But the secret to conferences is to skip all the talks.
Yeah.
Don't watch them. They'll be on YouTube. Make the personal connections. Talk to people. Get FaceTime. All these talks are just they're a bait and switch. They're an excuse for us to all come and hang out together. And it's the personal connections that really make these conferences valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Now you spoiled it.
Well,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you should come to our booth, Mycelium,
Yeah.
you know.
We're going to have new users who don't know that secret so that there will be an audience for the speakers. But the real secret is don't go to the talks. Talk to people, meet people.
Yeah, I think of this, I caught your panel, Stephanie. I caught John Light's talk. I caught the altcoin talk, or the altcoin panel, which was pretty interesting. It had some really interesting
That
characters
sounded
on
interesting.
it. Yeah, and then I gave my talk on content monetization, and I think besides that, I didn't see anything. But YouTube is a great thing.
Yeah, so you can really see also the evolution of Bitcoin a little bit in the conference evolution, because I was in Prague in 2011. There were, I think, 150 people there. And it was really, there were people coming from all over the world, but still. And then London, and now here. So it's really getting off, really exciting.
Dawn of a brave new world.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to this special episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Whether you liked, loved, or hated the show, we want to know what you think. Please send all listener mail to adam@letstalkbitcoin.com. Content for this episode was provided by Stephanie Murphy, Andreas Peterson, and listener Justice. Music for this episode was provided by Jared Rubens. For links to his work, visit letstalkbitcoin.com/music. We've got lots of content coming up, but I can't for the life of me tell you what'll be out next, so I've decided to stop making guesses here until we get the editorial calendar up and functional. Thanks so much for your support. If you'd like to donate to the show, please visit www.letstalkbitcoin.com. See you next time.